And it's interesting that you should say that because just recently, well, Gina and I just certify a number of circle keepers last week. And as I was leaving to go to our certification meeting, my husband said to me, I want to become a circle keeper also. And so it is really important and used in a lot of families. And one of the things that I say in this book and also in the previous book, The Power of Inclusion, is that Gina is one of the best listeners that I've been
Mhm.
around. And circles have really helped me in my listening because similar to what you shared, I always thought that we were coming together to talk, but we really are coming together to listen to one another. And it's that listening that brings about that really incredible shift.
Welcome to Narratives Leadership Story Talks, where great leaders go beyond the bottom line to create lasting impact. Join hosts Jerome and Julienne Ryan as they uncover the stories behind real-world challenges, offering practical insights to help you lead with empathy, authenticity, and purpose. Each episode dives into how leaders use storytelling to build trust, foster connection, and inspire action. Whether you're navigating workplace dynamics, driving change, or building high-performing teams.
Welcome to Leadership Story Talks. I'm Jerome CEO of Narrative.
I'm Julian B. Ryan.
All right, Julienne, good to see you again. And really excited for the two guests we have today. But before we move on to introducing the two of you, I want to remind our listeners to subscribe to the podcast, to leave a review wherever you find your podcasts, and check out also our YouTube channel in this episode's notes, as well as on narrative.com/podcast, because there you'll be able to find all of our previous episodes. And when you leave a review, when you subscribe, you automatically get new episodes in your feed. And that's the only way you'll have not to miss anything. So, and you're not going to want to miss this episode today because we have two very special guests. It's pretty rare that we have two people at the same time, but they are co-authors, and it was really important for us to have them both on the show. So we have today Cecilia Loving and Gina Leow. Cecilia Loving is Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at PBS, responsible for developing organizational strategy, providing ongoing advice and counsel, and cultivating future partnerships for PBS. She has over 25 years of experience in DEI and is the winner of several awards in her field. She's the author of over a dozen books, including Connecting Through Circles, Using Circles to Support Inclusion, Establish Belonging, and Build Trust. This is a book about how to create belonging and a stronger connection through the use of Indigenous circles, which she co-authored with our other guest, PBS DEI Director Gina Leow. Cecilia and Gina also publish online resources, including Courageous Conversations, which can be downloaded for free. So definitely check all of that out. And today we're definitely going to be we're going to be delving into Connecting Through Circles. Before we get to that, I want to introduce Gina, who's the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at PBS. She helps oversee DEI initiatives within PBS, including coordination of the DEI Council and related committees, employee resource groups, DEI messaging and events, employee training and education, restorative justice practices, reports, and other initiatives. She also has extensive work experience in collaborative leadership, youth development, international relations, and intercultural communications within nonprofits and government organizations. She created the New York City Bar Association's first mindfulness and well-being toolkit and was included in Lawline's Top Women Faculty of 2020. And of course, she's the co-author of Connecting Through Circles, Using Circles to Support Inclusion, Establish Belonging, and Build Trust with Cecilia. Well, welcome both to the show. It's really wonderful to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to describe yourselves a little bit for the audience? People know me and Julienne pretty well. We're all over social media, but perhaps for those who are listening and can't see.
Sure, I'm happy to go first. This is Gina Leow, and I'd love to just briefly visually describe myself. I'm an Asian American woman. I'm wearing a navy blue top with a silver and gold necklace and gold hoop earrings, and I have long, dark brown hair and dark brown eyes. I always have thought of myself as a PBS kid, and so it's such a pleasure to work at PBS now for almost 3 years as a CI director, really helping to create a positive and holistic work environment as part of Cecilia's team. And as Jerome mentioned, I'm the co-author of Connecting Through Circles, which I wrote with Cecilia. And it's such a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm just going to describe myself also. I'm Cecilia Loving, Senior Vice President, Head of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for PBS, and I am an African American woman. My hair is pulled back, and I have on turquoise earrings, turquoise necklace, as well as a black top. And in addition to leading DEI, just to give you a little more context about me, I'm also a lawyer. I am by background a minister, and of course, a writer. And so storytelling is really important to everything that I do. As a theologian, for example, I know that the ancient text says that the beginning was the word, and that beginning is the power to co-create. As a lawyer, I've been taught the importance and value of how words shape our narrative of the truth. And as a thespian also, I understand the importance of delivery and the manner in which we tell all of our stories. And so, as Gina indicated, just being a leader in what we abbreviate as DEI is really the work of healing. And so I think that's one of the most important aspects of storytelling. We have the ability to invite and welcome and include through the power of our stories. And so I just love the work that you're doing at Narrative, and I'm really so grateful to be here.
Well, thank you and welcome. It's really wonderful to have you both on the show. And I just wanted to build a little bit on what you said, Cecilia, just now about the healing work of DEI. That's what underlies it, and I really appreciate you saying that, because when I read your book, Connecting Through Circles, that came through pretty loud and clear. Of course, the concept of connecting, which is right there in the title, but that idea of healing. And I'm wondering if maybe you could, and the floor is both of yours, but tell us a little bit about the origin of that book and that work, and maybe that word healing. How did you sort of come to realize that was the word?
Well, I think that we have a choice, and we can use our stories to be more destructive, or we can use them in order to really heal. And one of the things that I experience in theater is how we use those stories to invite the imagination through character and plot and in settings and speech and movement and all of those things that support the magic of creation. And then also through the context and lens of the law, I realized that we are really comprised of those stories that really make up what we call in the law cases. And we use those cases to uplift truth and justice, but there's also restorative justice. And so that's really the manner in which I came to use the circles. And I work with an organization called the New York City Center for Creative Conflict Resolution. And I work with someone who is a judge, Judge Ray Kramer, and he shared with me this particular way to resolve disputes. And so that was the real reason that I used in the beginning, but then that use began to evolve over time. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But I really went from using it as conflict resolution and then began to expand it in order to build community. And when we begin to use it to build community and to heal harm, we realized its importance in things like teaching emotional intelligence and psychological safety and things of that nature.
Wow, amazing, and thanks for that background as well. I think it's so. Maybe we can actually delve a little bit into the focus on circles, right? What this judge introduced you to, and I'm curious why the focus on a circle. Like, what's so powerful about? Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the power of putting people into a circle.
Sure. And I'm sure Gina's going to want to chime in on this one as well. But, there's something about this archetype, which is really over 100,000 years old, that is very healing and very restorative. And many traditions, I have, recently been taught that, particularly in the African tradition, we do a lot of work in circles. And of course, in indigenous cultures like Native Americans, we come together in the power of circle. And so it is a great opportunity to share our stories, to be vulnerable, and most importantly, to really listen to one another. And that's one of the things that is so important in DEI. We really have to take a step back and listen and learn from one another. And when you do that, what happens is that there is the sense of a common ground that develops, and that common ground builds cohesiveness, it builds connection, it allows us to begin to support each other in an amazing way. And I love Grandmother Strong Oak, who was one of my circle keeper teachers, always taught us to say all my relations as we pass the proverbial talking stick. And so there are certain rules in place in circle that allow us to better hold space for one another. And I'm sure Gina can share a little bit more about those rules as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So those who are new to the circle process, I'll just introduce some of our key foundational rules. So Cecilia mentioned a talking piece. So I have an example of a talking piece. It's
great.
this opal color, multicolored stone that my mother gave me. And one of the key rules of circle is to have a talking piece in the circle. It could be one that each participant brings that holds significance for them and holds a story. So the first prompt usually is, what is your talking piece and what does it mean to you? And so that is a way that we get to know one another, to understand what our values are, to see commonalities in our core values, and really to build that foundation and that safe space to be able to invite and reflect on additional prompts as we keep going around the circle. And whoever is holding the talking piece has the option to either respond to the prompt or simply just hold the talking piece in silence, or pass the talking piece on to the next person if they're not ready to share. And the most important rule in circle is to be present. So you can even have circles where there's no talking whatsoever, but the simple act of listening and being present for one another and what everyone wants to share is really key in the circle process.
It's very the piece on listening really resonates with me. We I think that was the kind of origin of our story together, is that I believe, Gina, you had gone to a session on radical listening, if I'm not mistaken, and our co-founder Paul Brody, Dr. Paul Brody, was in the was one of the speakers, and I remember that's something that we really connected on. So it makes a lot of sense. And of course, in the work that we then did together, that was kind of the through line, was always listening. And I'm curious, when you facilitate circles like this, do you sort of go in with, or is it communicate? Because you mentioned, sometimes maybe there's no talking, but is there kind of an agreement going in on what we're trying to get to on the other side, or not? Do you sort of have a goal in mind? I'm thinking in particular when perhaps you're doing this in communities where there's tension or struggle. I mean, we talked about conflict resolution, right, as one of the uses for this. How would you say you approach the circle to begin with when you're about to start one with a new group of people? Is there something that you're talking to people about? Here's what we're here for, and where we want to get to, and please be present for that. How does that work?
That's a great question, Jerome, because generally what happens in circle is that they're rarely spontaneous. I'm sure
Mm.
there are many instances where they could be, but we usually plan in advance. And so we have those different needs of circle that we've already really messaged, and we've invited participants. Sometimes we even have RSVPs so we can determine the size of the circle. Say, for example, if there is an event that is really an emotional one that immediately comes to mind, or like the killings that took place in Buffalo and many other places,
Mm.
California, etc. And so we might have convene a circle around that. We
Mm.
might have circles at retreats. And so that also indicates a certain kind of need. When we have our team meetings, we automatically will go into circle.
Mm.
And so in those instances, depending upon the audience, we will set forth the circle rules that Gina just indicated. And so we are letting everybody know that they can only speak when they're holding the talking piece, that they're not required to share anything, that they speak from the eye, from the heart of their own experience, that everything flows in the same direction in circle. And so what we also provide as part of circle are introductions. And those openings allow us to really set the stage. And oftentimes our openings use a mindfulness practice. And so we become centered and intentional about why we have gathered. The opening celebration can be a poem, it can be a video, it can be some kind of blessing. And then right after that, we start sharing those circle rules so that everybody knows up front. And we also make sure that we really serve as a good role model for how those rules should unfold. And then we use those prompts, those questions that we put in circle. And then at the very end of the circle, we have a closing that sort of seals that communication and the relationship and the vulnerability that we've all shared together. And I want to mention one other really key rule, and that's the confidence, the privacy. What is said in circle stays in circle. You can take the lessons, but not the stories themselves. And we try to honor that to the extent where if the two of us were in circle and you said something that was so profound and so amazing that when I saw you the next time, I cannot bring that up for you,
Oh,
even
interesting.
in our own privacy.
Yeah.
I listened to, I've been reading your book and also listening to some of the podcasts, and there was something that really struck me when you were, Cecilia, when you were speaking to Sharon Salisbury on that podcast about the lesson was that it's not always about talking in circles and feeling you have to say something or contribute. So I think that's such a great reminder. And then the second thing it struck me, as much as I've known about talking sticks in the past and it's come up, it suddenly hit me this morning. It's a great behavior disruptor. it's a reminder. It can give you a prop to just remind you that it's not your time to speak and maybe change some of the group dynamics. And I'm going to actually use this, my husband, practice it and see if it works, if we can give each other a chance to listen, because we can do great in our professional lives. It's just at home sometimes we have to practice a little bit better. So I'm going to test this out and find his talking piece and mine and see how we go. But I just respect what you're doing. It's very beautiful. It's familiar, but it's so in its simplicity. There's so many lessons. In all seriousness, I just think it's a beautiful thing that you've been sharing with the world.
Thank you so much. And it's interesting that you should say that because just recently, well, Gina and I just certify a number of circle keepers last week. And as I was leaving to go to our certification meeting, my husband said to me, I want to become a circle keeper also. And so it is really important and used in a lot of families. And one of the things that I say in this book and also in the previous book, The Power of Inclusion, is that Gina is one of the best listeners that I've been around. And circles have really helped me in my listening because similar to what you shared, I always thought that we were coming together to talk, but we really are coming together to listen to one another. And it's that listening that brings about that really incredible shift, that your courage and your determination, perhaps in some cases your fear, whatever your change or transformation is really mine as well. And that we share that same heart and that same connection. And Grandmother Strong Oak shared a really phenomenal sort of analogy about circles in The Power of Inclusion. She said that the call of meditation brought her to the waters of the world and its streams and its rivers and its oceans, and it brought her to mirroring in her the waters that flow through her veins and her arteries in a dance of intricate connection. And so she says, what happens to the water happens to me in circle.
Wow, that's very powerful. Thanks for sharing all these details about the process as well. I really appreciate that. And there's one thing that I'm struck by is, Gina, you mentioned when you were talking about some of these ground rules, you actually showed us the object, right? And you said where it came from. Can you talk a little bit about the significance of that? Because I know that for us at narrative and storytelling, objects are quite sacred, and we can, we often ask participants actually to come with a meaningful object because it can be a really good source for an experience that can then be turned into a story. So that's kind of how familiar I am with the concept of an object. But this is as something that this essentially, the way that I'm interpreting it, it's giving me the power to speak, right? But can you tell us a little bit about the process of even just choosing an object? And because it seemed like that was pretty significant. You told us what the object was. You told us where it came from, who gave it to you. So I'd love to hear a little more about that.
Absolutely. Yes. So one of the things that we say in Circle 2 is that folks can share as much as they want to share. So that includes a talking piece. They should feel comfortable with sharing the story of the talking piece if they intend to bring it. And so what I like to do to really discover more stories and share more stories and reflect on stories of my own is I like to bring a different talking piece to each circle. And so I have some talking pieces that I have used more often, but as of lately, every time I go to a new circle, I like to bring a new one because I get to reflect on what it means to me. And when we've done circles with other team members or other colleagues, one of the really meaningful takeaways for me was that folks might have known each other or worked together for many, many years, and yet when you are in circle, you learn so much more about one another that you might not have learned if you weren't in circle. And so, to your point, Jerome, it is very sacred, but I think when we are able to use the talking piece, it brings us the confidence to be able to share our stories and really see the connections that we have with one another. It also allows us to listen too, not just speak. So we can hold our talking piece when it's not our turn. Um, and we usually in-person circles, we have a common ground in the center of the circle where we place all the talking pieces. One of the things I would love to mention too about listening, and I have to credit co-founder of Narrative, Paul Brody, who, as you mentioned, Jerome, I took a radical listening, healing conversations workshop that he led, and there are a number of listening activities that we did. One of them didn't require speaking. We paired up and with our partner, we would do an activity together without speaking for 15 minutes. And then after those 15 minutes, we came together and shared what we learned about one another. And Paul was my partner, and I just learned so much from him with just being together, just being in his presence and not speaking at all. And so one of the most important things about circle too is to be able to have that quiet moment, as Cecilia mentioned. And one of the prompts that we start with as well is, what do you need to say to be present? And I know that's a key theme in the narrative workshops too, is thinking about what is hindering us from listening to ourselves and to others. So when we're able to recognize that and share that, then we're able to be more present for one another in circles.
Yeah. Wow.
I'd also just like to underscore what Gina shared by mentioning, two names, first of all, Elizabeth Clemens and Kay Pranis, who do powerful circle work and are some of our teachers as well. And one of the circles that they do that is really amazing is without any words. And that is using sticks. If we looked in the corner of my office, we would see a big basket of sticks. And what you do is you use those sticks to tell a story in silence. And one of the most powerful experiences we've had in using the sticks is working with some of the firefighters in New York City who are amazing circle keepers. And when we were training them, they did some of the most amazing, imaginative things with the sticks. And that is the circle that I think unnerves people a lot more than when they even have to speak.
Yeah. Go ahead, Julienne.
It resonates with me because as you were talking about Paul and then your recent example, my brain went back for a minute to when I was at Teachers College. I took some group dynamics classes and we started the weekend in total silence. And it was interesting, doesn't quite define it, about the projections and the energy when we took words out of the equation and how people related to each other. And that scene is always with me when I'm going into a new space about what shows up, what gets projected, and sometimes not talking is the best thing you can do in a situation, just being there and letting things happen.
Yeah.
That's really powerful. And, one of the things that, I think Gina had also alluded to earlier is that sometimes when that talking stick is passed to you and the previous share has been so profound, you can just sit and hold that talking piece. And that is just so much more persuasive, so much more moving and transformational than saying anything at all.
Yeah, it's interesting because what it makes me think of is that it must also be quite a relief too. There must be, because we constantly, all of us, feel the pressure to speak. Now, for some of us, it might be very easy and that's kind of the go-to, but I think for many people, it's not easy to speak. And when we're in meetings and somebody has just said something that's impactful, there's a lot of pressure for everyone else to start to reflect on it or build on it or say something myself that's maybe even more interesting, depending on our personalities and how competitive we are. All of that comes up in our minds. And so the idea to give permission, of giving permission to people, you don't have to actually say anything here. And actually, it's encouraged that you don't speak. I'm sure there's some people who must feel that, yes, I mean, as you all said here, it's uncomfortable, it's a little awkward. How do we do this? We're not used to it, but also must be a relief. Is that something that you've also found?
I think that that's true, but one of the astonishing things to me is actually the reverse in
Hmm.
this sense. In this sense, there, the majority of people or many people who come into Circle have something that is on their hearts, in their, bones, so to speak, and maybe it's that trauma, and they may not think that they're going to share or to speak,
Hmm.
and yet it comes out. And
Hmm.
so I would say more times than not in holding Circle, we could be in the first round and there are tears, there's release. We were in a circle with many of our executives. Gina and I did a retreat a couple of years ago, and some of I think actually all of them cried. But one of them I recall saying, I'm just such a strong person. I never do this. I don't know why I'm doing it now. And I always think about what our head of HR said. He said circles are almost magical. And so there we continue, as Gina says, it's the gift that keeps giving. We continue to explore why. Why are they
Hmm.
so magical?
Hmm. That's amazing. And thanks for that response, because that makes a lot of sense too, is that, in order to talk about something that's painful or difficult, or challenging, or trauma, et cetera. I mean, there's a whole range of reasons why we may not want to talk about something or think that we won't talk about it. And then when you come into a space that is really just about listening, I would think that would encourage something in some people, that maybe there's a sense that, oh, this is safe. This is
Mhm.
perhaps the space I've been looking for a long time. And from what I'm hearing and what I've read, I feel like there's a lot of power in terms of using the circle, to empower people to speak about things, that without forcing them at all, but just naturally speak about things that they hadn't thought they would speak about. And it must be, yeah, what you're describing there is very cathartic as well. Julienne, yeah.
Yeah, I know if anyone doesn't see me on the screen and just listening, my head has been bobbing up and down, even though I said I need to break that habit on screen. Um, the alchemy, you just said something that's resonate, because one of my coaching clients, when we did a group, one of her people said it wasn't magic, but it was magical
Mm.
to see certain dynamics shift even for a short period of time in a group. And then I'm always asking Jerome or people I sought guidance from, the alchemy of when somebody chooses to raise their voice and take a risk in a group, whether it's with strangers or coworkers. I guess the point is not to try to dissect it, but just to appreciate it, because sometimes I'm like, that was so courageous. And, I hear people saying, I've never told this to anybody, or I've never told this in a group, but I feel safe in this large group with you today, and I'm going to make a step to do it. So you are creating opportunities, like you said, and both of you, Gina, to heal and to be seen, heard, and appreciated, I think.
And it's part of it is that we love to form the circles because we are building community, to your point. And I love what you shared about the alchemy of circle. We are building that sense of belonging, which is really a biological need that everyone has. And it allows everybody to get to know each other without difficult. We are helping to support the psychological safety that provides those safe spaces for inclusion, for learning, for contributing, even for challenging what we call innovation safety. And, Gina and I have also taken it to the next level and used circles for coaching
Mm.
on leadership, on emotional intelligence. And to your point about those courageous conversations, we have them over a multitude of topics. And then there's also that benefit of healing harm and resolving conflict as well.
Yes.
Mm.
And when we are in circle, we invite everyone to the circle. So there's an instance where Cecilia and I were part of a circle, and some folks were sitting outside of the circle. And Cecilia actually invited them in. They said, no, no. She said, sit in the circle, participate with us so that everyone can be part of the circle. And
Mm.
that person had really remarkable things to share. And so this practice invites everyone in some spaces where some people might not feel like they have the voice to share. And that's why I love doing our team meetings in circle too, because we're able to all share, what we're working on, what we need more support in, and that really builds the building blocks for our work going forward. And so we try to encourage folks to utilize the circle at their team meetings in order to build community, especially when they're first getting to know one another.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. It's funny you beat me to it because I was going to ask about that in terms of the role of the circle in the way that you facilitate these for teams, and so it makes sense that yes, at the beginning when we're all meeting each other and there's that sense of belonging that starts to get created from the beginning. Makes a lot of sense, and I'm curious. You mentioned that you've got circle keepers and that you certify circle keepers. Now, do you do this in the context of your DEI work in general, or is it sort of separate from, or maybe it's all connected? But can you tell us a little bit more about the circle keepers and who comes to you and how to get certified?
Sure, we love to address that. We love certifying circle keepers because that's how you keep the practice alive. And as you certify, those five go off in different directions and
Mm.
they are having their own circles. And so at PBS, we have now certified almost 70
Wow.
circle keepers. And we not only certify circle keepers within the organization, but we are headquarters. And so we don't own all the stations. They're member stations. They're over 330. And we also make ourselves available to certify at those stations. So we might go off to St. Louis and certify their leadership or whoever their CEO wants us to certify. We work also with other public media organizations and we certify them. We've also been called by certain institutions and of higher education to
Mm.
go in and certify them as well. And so basically it's whoever wants to be certified, we make ourselves available to do it because it continues to build the community for such an important practice. And there are restorative cities now like Oakland and Detroit. And so you really need those circle keepers to keep the tradition alive.
Amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
We do circles in person or virtually. They're just as strong and powerful either way. And it's been such a remarkable experience to do both kinds of circles. Um, one pro tip for any Zoom circles is that you can actually move the squares on your screen
Mm.
in the order of the circle so that you know who you're sending the talking piece to and who you're passing it on to next. And when we do virtual circles, we say the prompts and the order verbally, but we also put them in the chat for all to see.
Mm.
It, I want to just quickly underscore what Gina shared about the virtual
Yeah.
circles. And when you think about that, when we're physically present in circle, we keep that configuration of circle. And so I started thinking, like, why are the virtual circles equally effective? And during the pandemic, we started doing so many circles virtual. And I think it is the repetitive pattern, it is that rhythm of the share that forms that alchemy that Julian mentioned, that energy of awareness of one thing following the other, and respecting that space and that deliverance of us, of how we come together. And so it is just as effective
Mm,
when you do it virtually as it is when you do it in person.
mm. Hearing you speak about the rhythm of it, the pattern of it, et cetera, that's, very, yeah, why would that change? That makes a lot of sense. Reminds me of many, many years ago. I remember doing a training where we combined our storytelling piece with a drumming circle, actually. And people were given drums, and it didn't matter if you'd ever played the drums or not. And there was one facilitator with a drum that sort of started the beat, and then everyone naturally followed that beat. And so you could actually see how the circle was forming without actually necessarily being a circle, but it was all about the rhythm and the pattern, and everyone could easily get into it. It didn't have to be, you didn't have to be a pro at drums, et cetera. And there was also a biological connection with that rhythm. The rhythm of the heart was following the rhythm of the drum. And so naturally, everyone gets engaged in a very, very different way. And you just reminded me of that. And so, yeah, it would make sense that virtually would be just as effective. Julianne, were you about to say something or?
I do. And I'm like, yes, I was listening act. I was really present, but little parts of my brain was talking to itself at the same time. Um, it's it's the beauty. Years ago, I would have argued when somebody said we're going to do things on Zoom and then you're going to develop intimacy. I was like, no, we're not. That's impossible. But it's what you just brought up, Jerome. It's the voice. It's the notes in the voice. It's the human component. Even though we're on this virtual experience, we still, there's energy behind it, and there's
Mhm.
intention, and there's focus, and that still comes across. And I think that has been one of the positive lessons of us having to have gone all virtual.
Mm,
So
yeah.
yeah, it does make a difference. And how you had drums, there's singing bowls, like all these timeless tools that keep coming back and being even more relevant and important nowadays. So thank you for reading my face. I telegraph everything at this point across my forehead. But yeah, it's so amazing. So amazing.
One of the organizations that I volunteer with, that does everything in healing circles is called Hidden Water, which is located in New York.
Hmm.
And during the pandemic, I led a number of those circles, which last for 12 weeks. Those circles are for the victims, for the most part, of sexual abuse as children, and now adults, and now trying to process and may not have processed what they're going through with anyone
Mm,
else before the circle. And my experience was I found that there was a distinct movement from harm to healing in every single circle, and those circles were done remotely. And so that for me really underscores our ability to come together and not be distracted by some of those physical things that we might be distracted by if we are in person.
yeah. Wow. Time is absolutely flying, and that doesn't surprise me because this has been so engaging. I want to make sure we get to a question that we always ask of all of our guests, and we've got two of you, so I'd love for the two of you to respond, not simultaneously because we won't hear, but one by one, and whoever wants to start first. But the question is this: could you tell us about an experience that has shaped who you are today, still influences you in some way or informs your work, decision making? Yeah, either one of you.
Sure, I'm happy to go first. So I am ethnically Chinese, but I actually had a Greek babysitter growing up who took care of me since birth. And so I grew up learning mainly English and Greek growing up. And as I became an adult, I also learned Mandarin Chinese. And I've been exposed to a lot of different cultures growing up. My stepfather is Jewish. My Yeah, I just have a lot of cultural influences. I'm from Queens, New York. I know that's a great connection that I have with Julienne. And so just learning different languages and being exposed to different faiths and different aspects of identity really opened my eyes to the beauty of the world and how we have very different stories, but also a lot of similarities and core values that are the same. And that inspired me to study international relations, inspired me to find my purpose in doing DEI work so that we can learn more about one another and really hold space for all of our stories. And so that experience of meeting my Greek babysitter growing up really catapulted me into the openness and the practice of being able to um, dive into DEI work, eventually working with Cecilia in the DEI space, and led me to rediscover circles. I practiced circles at school in fifth grade. I didn't know it was called circles at the time. But then when I learned the circle practice formally and was trained as a circle keeper, I was reminded that circle keeping is such a powerful tool that can not only be used at schools and in the justice system, but also in the workplace.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you. Wow, how about that? From the Greek babysitter to where we are right now. Amazing. Thank you so much. How about you, Cecilia?
Sure. One of the things that comes to my mind is when I was leading DEI at FDNY, the Fire Department of New York City, and I really learned the importance of asking questions, of being comfortable not knowing the answer, of
Mm,
being able to walk into spaces of vulnerability and really sit and engage with whatever comes up. And it's interesting because that's what you really do in Circle. And at the fire department, I had to meet with over 1,000 officers, and in one particular instance, over 600 company commanders. And I want to say that it was an honor to serve New York City's bravest, but they would tell you that they are a really tough crowd. And I had to engage them in a discussion around DEI. And I believe that one of the best ways to learn or unlearn in the DEI space is not to have it shoved at you, but for you to really discover where it lives in your own bones and in your own values. And so in this particular instance, I met with them really in groups of 20 to 25. And what I would do is sit in a room, not mention DEI at all, but let them ask questions, any questions that they had in order to get to know me. And I used it as an opportunity to share my vulnerability, my stories, revealing the common ground that we shared. I was in, for example, the World Trade Center in 1993 when it was
mm,
first bombed. And I saw them go up as I went down. And at the time, I had recently lost my dad. And when I shared that story, they resonated with it because they understand the loss of loved ones. And so after I finished, I got up from the chair and then I began to walk the room and I became the questioner. And I asked them why they were successful. How did they lead some of the best teams? And why is FDNY number one when it comes to responding to emergencies? And I never mentioned DEI until after they began to share things like authentic trust, supportive
mm,
relationships, excellent training, community engagement, positive work environments. And only then would I say to them, now you just told me what DEI is all about. And here's the thing, it wasn't until after I spoke to them and reviewed all the notes that I compiled from all of those meetings that I began to really see the common ground and that they had really created the framework for DEI by sharing what was important to them. And so that shifted me into realizing that the answers to peace, to harmony, to compassion, to building and sustaining a really better way are within all of us. And all we have to do is find that common ground. And so circles are one of the ways that we engage in the power of not knowing, but discovering that truth together.
Mm.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Yeah, go ahead, Julienne. Sorry.
No, just thank you. There's so much, but thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing these stories and these experiences, and just noticing, Cecilia, the role already in that experience that we can see of you as a listener first and foremost, and then a storyteller, and then again a listener, right? And that's the cycle, certainly, that we find ourselves in a lot, is that cycle between listening and telling, and what happens in between those things is where the magic happens. And I really appreciate you coming onto the podcast to really go into details of the details of the process of how a circle works, what it's for, and why you've come to it. It's really quite clear, and I loved all the examples you used. So this has really been a gift to me and to Julienne and to all our listeners. And I know we've covered a lot of ground, but is there anything that you would want to leave our listeners with as a kind of something to remember before we say goodbye?
You want to go first, Gina?
What a great question. I would say be open to all the stories that that are in our DNA, and we say in our book, the stories are in our DNA, and circles allow for such tremendous opportunities to learn not only about yourself but also about others in the circle. And when we are practicing our deep listening, our storytelling, our ability to hold space for others, those are skills that really transcend time and space, and that we're able to bring those skill sets when we're not in circle. So we can bring them into every interaction that we have with colleagues, with our loved ones. I've developed such stronger relationships just from learning about and practicing the tools I've learned in circle, even though I haven't been in circle with some other people. I could see the shifts, as Julienne mentioned, the shifts in how I interact with others in a more positive and more compassionate way.
Beautiful. Thank you. How about you, Cecilia?
Sure. Thank you so much. We're really grateful for you once again and all the work that you do in teaching us the gift of how to tell our stories. And so one of the things that I just wanted to lift up is that the circles are different than a conversation. They're different than methods like litigation and arbitration and mediation, all of which I've done, and deal with, a lot more posturing. In circle, there's a purity of heart that is really drawn out that I haven't witnessed in any other way. It's a desire, I believe, to tell the truth and really to pour that truth into the hearts of others to be made whole. And so the circles serve also a need to slow down and to be tender with ourselves, to give us the time that we really need in order to feel our pain and to look back at our journeys, to move forward and to hold space for others and to be healed really in the moment. And so highly recommend it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Yes, Julienne.
A phrase has been coming to my mind throughout this entire experience of your circle work and also the organization you represent and are part of. You to open up worlds for our, individuals that you're coming in contact and their team up, and then the organization opens up worlds to people who couldn't travel, couldn't learn. It is a holistic experience, and you're doing great work. So it was such an honor to have you both come and see that logo pop up every day when you exchange some emails with us. So thank you. Keep doing the great things you're doing.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you again. And as always, thanks to our listeners for listening today. If you want to learn more, you can, I really highly recommend, and we'll have this in the show notes as well, getting the book Connecting Through Circles by both Gina Leow and Cecilia Loving. I'll give you the exact title: Connecting Through Circles, Using Circles to Support Inclusion, Establish Belonging, and Build Trust. Really well worth it, and obviously, if you want to learn more about PBS, you can find it on your television, hopefully. But also go to narrative.com, NARATIV.com, where you can find this episode and other episodes. You can also go to our YouTube channel, where you will see us visually as well. And if you've been inspired by this session and the stories that were told and what we talked about in terms of storytelling and listening, this is what we do at Narrative, and you can consider enrolling yourself and or your team in our group and one-on-one training programs that focus exactly on how to find, craft, and tell a story that's really going to move the needle for you and your team. So please consider enrolling, and we're always ready to listen to you. As always, thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review on your favorite podcast platform, check out our YouTube channel. All of this drives the word of mouth, and it allows more and more people to get the benefit of the wisdom we got today. So until next time, I want to thank Julienne once more for co-hosting with me. It's always a pleasure. And thanks to our wonderful guests, Cecilia Loving and Gina Leow. And our listeners, thanks again for being here, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.